There he is.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of From Tailors with Love. Today we're talking Bond versus Hunt, a kind of brand off, if you will. I think this episode we're going to dip into some of the financing and brands of mainly the Mission Impossible franchise and pair them off with the Bond franchise and see how they contrast. And I want to know, does the brands and the licensing in the Bond films see so predominant because we're looking for them, because we're Bond nuts, versus Mission Impossible, where they seem a little bit more subtle, or are they just better placed in Mission Impossible? And we're going to break it up into segments. We got watches to look at, cars to look at, tech to look at, and clothes to look at. And then we'll finish with some personal thoughts on Dead Reckoning at the end. Joining me today is Zed from Tie Another Day. How are we doing today, Zed?
I'm doing very well, not upset at all, but yeah, doing very well indeed.
Not upset?
You've not seen me very upset.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought something happened in between you talking to me and me introducing you. That something happened anyway. And on the other line two, we've got Remmert from Bond Lifestyle. How are we doing today, Remmert?
Very good. Good to see you again, Peter, and good to talk to you again, Z.
All right, let's get into it. I'm excited. So we're going to start with watches, I think, to begin with. And Zed, I'm going to go over to you first because you're running a little series on your Instagram page, Tie Another Day on Instagram. And perhaps you can lend some thoughts on this. Are the watches that Ethan wears in Mission Impossible, are they kind of noticeable as much as they are in the Bond films? And what's your take and what are your impressions?
It's a good question. I think like in the first three films, it's noted that he wears Casio G-Shock watches, and they actually are functional and they actually are used as an actual watch. So if you remember in Mission Impossible 2, where he has to put the countdown for when Naya has got infected with Chimera, there's a countdown which he uses on his watch.
I do. Actually, wait. I do remember that quite well. Hold on. How does it go? Sorry, I butted in. Carry on.
It's fine. Yeah, so he does use the watch as a
Yep.
countdown clock, and also in Mission Impossible 3, Philip Seymour Hoffman does say, "The last time I saw you were wearing a watch," and issues a countdown for that. So they're much more functional, and it kind of fits in for the character. And in Ghost Protocol, he then goes to wearing he then starts wearing a Tudor watch. But after that, the last few films, the watches haven't been predominant. So it's a case of like there's a use for them, but then afterwards they're not being used at all certainly in the most recent films.
Right. Remmert, on your site, Watches ID, how popular are the Mission Impossible watches, would you say, versus the Bond watches? And is it more accessible for people to be buying the Casios, obviously, than forking out for the Amigas? What's your take on these?
Yeah, I see the Bond watches are more popular, I would say. They're more known, they're more of a statement, more iconic. The Casio watches are, of course, more affordable, but somehow Mission Impossible doesn't have the same impact, I would say, as the Bond films. I'm wearing the first one here from the first movie, the first Casio from Mission Impossible 1, which is a great watch, and that has a following, even though he never uses it. But it became known as the Mission Impossible watch. So it's definitely affordable and it's definitely popular, but not, I would say, as iconic as any of the Bond Amigas or even the older Seikos. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, Bond is very much, known for his gadget watches. And the Mission Impossible watches are used, but they haven't been really a gadget watch either. So, yeah.
Which is kind of nuts considering how much tech goes on with the Mission Impossible films that they haven't really employed the watches. And I just wonder, sometimes I think about this with the Mission Impossible films, whether they don't want to deliberately tread on the Bond toes, right? So you'll notice that Tom Cruise will wear a dinner suit with a tie, for example, when he goes to the opera, because I'm guessing if he wears a bow tie, that will just make him look like James Bond. So I wonder if there are certain things that they do purposely not to make it look like a James Bond film. And I think the watches are very much identifiable with the Bond character and have been throughout the franchise. And on a broader subject, you have Craig as an ambassador for Amiga doing Amiga adverts. I think one of the very first press photos we got for No Time to Die was launched for Amiga, right? Where he's in the tank. And so that got everybody excited. And you don't really have that at all with the Mission Impossible films. Remmert, do you?
I think the only tie-in was the Mission Impossible 3 watch, which Z Tainade, you have one of those, I think.
Yes, yeah.
It's not. It's yeah. It has that one is the only one that's actually, I think, officially branded Mission Impossible 3 and marketed like that. That was in 2006, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and it came in its own special packaging as well. So yeah.
But you don't have separate events like in London for the launch of this watch with Tom Cruise turning up in a tuxedo and having a whole event around it that kind of bleeds in and cross-pollinates the
Yeah, so
Bond, right?
I think that's actually for almost all the brands a little bit. Yeah, like I think that there's just so much more brand tie-in with Bond, especially lately. But even a long time ago, even Die Another Day, right in the middle of the Mission Impossible start, sort of, those kind of Tomorrow Never Dies, like all those movies. There was already so many brand tie-ins that were publicly, in newspapers. Like everybody, all the brands were able to really milk that. And somehow with Mission Impossible, that just didn't happen. And I think that might be Tom Cruise himself not really wanting that, because I think with a lot of things, it's not per se that he's like Top Gun. Also, it's not about the brands per se. He does wear a few recognizable things, but he chose to wear, for example, in Top Gun 2 is the same watch that he wore in the first Top Gun movie,
The
which is not,
Porsche one, right?
Yeah, the Porsche design, which is not per se a popular or really readily available watch. So it's not to promote per se, I think, Porsche design, but more he wanted, I guess, to do just continuity and have the same watch. So I think somehow his focus is not on the brands and promoting them. And he will take, I'm sure they'll take some brand sponsorships, but I think their goal doesn't seem to be to really sell as many as possible, which Bond in a way does, because they even sell their brand to things that are not even in a movie. So that's a whole different concept.
Zed, you wanted to come in there?
Totally agree on that. I think as we go on, we'll talk about the differences in brands in the tech. It's not been like a consistent brand that's been through. There's only one or two consistent brands which have featured throughout the Mission Impossible films, but it's more, you could say, more for a relatable item as opposed to something that's more aspirational, which I think Bond is, and that has kind of come through the character, through the books, through the films. Whereas Ethan Hunt being a new character, the Mission Impossible franchise itself is newish, so there's not that established. This is a brand that's associated with Ethan.
I think also actually they almost make it more unattainable, because like another brand that comes to mind with Mission Impossible is Oakley for the sunglasses.
Yeah.
But especially lately, he's been modifying those sunglasses or goggles for the movie, and those modified versions are actually not available even. So the latest goggles with the big jump, these ones, the motorcycle jump, they might be available at some point, but they were not during the movie release. And so that's almost like a deliberate thing, like we're going to use a brand, but actually you can't even buy it. So I mean that's almost the opposite of what Bond does. So yeah, I think that's interesting I think that might be again in Tom Cruise input, where he's like, I'll have something relatable, but you can't get it, something like that.
Yeah. We'll get onto it with the tech, but that reminds me of the story with the Apple when they had the laptop. And I think Apple spent like 15 million putting a laptop in the movie, but it was
That was a
such
lot
a
back
late,
then. That was a lot.
right? That is huge money, and it was so last minute that they didn't have the laptop ready to sell or something like that. And then basically, also the guy who was like in charge of the tech didn't have the interface. So everything that you see Tom Cruise when he's looking for the job or the Job character and he's kind of typing in the room, that's all like MS operating system, right? That kind of post command stuff. It's nothing to do with Apple. So it's a complete but they wanted to look cool, Apple, at the time, and be alongside the next cool thing that Tom Cruise does. But it is interesting. It's like going back to what you're saying though there, Remmert. I think they like to have something that's unattainable, and that's quite exclusive. On that, just a footnote to what you're saying about the aspirational thing. I was thinking this earlier, that whilst like the Tom Cruise or the Mission Impossible franchise has the luxury element sometimes, like going to Dubai or going to these really fancy shindigs that they have to subvert and get in there. There's no, Ethan Hunt doesn't walk into a hotel, look at it and go, I ain't fucking staying in this dump. I'm going to go next door and pretend that I've won the lottery, right? So I wonder if that kind of hamstrings them in a way, that they can't elevate these brands to a luxury level or an aspirational level because Ethan Hunt isn't that character. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Zed.
No, I get that. I think actually it's trying to be more real life as opposed to being aspiration. It's more like, it's more functional. It's more, this is what. I mean, I've no idea what a CI operative is on, but compared to, say, what Bond maybe his value, but there's obviously a much more practical, real usefulness to it, as opposed to something that's more befitting maybe somebody who's like Bond, who's had a luxury lifestyle from a long period of time.
Yeah. Should we get into cars?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right. Next one up is the cars and the difference. Let's talk. Zed, I'll bring you in on this one first. So Bond hasn't just driven Aston Martins. We had like a Ford in Casino Royale. He's even driven BMWs before. But the Mission Impossible look to have the BMW now locked in as a signed-on brand partner. And I was thinking, is it kind of counter narrative to have an American operative driving around in like these foreign cars, or should he have something a little bit closer to home, like I don't know, like a Chevrolet or a Mustang? I'm picturing Face from the A-Team. That's basically where I'm going with this. And also, how do you feel like BMW have done with integrating their films into the MI franchise?
So it's interesting. I get where you're coming from. It's interesting in the films that they're all kind of like based outside the US. So if we look at Mission Impossible 1 for up until Dead Reckoning, most of the scenes take place abroad in Europe, in the Middle East, and it makes sense to have maybe like a BMW in Prague, in Paris. I think the one that we're showing here in Ghost Protocol, that was the first showing of the i7, the new i7, and
I think it's the i8, isn't it?
Oh, it's i8, yeah. So that was like a prototype when that was when they were filming that. So I think the brand itself has kind of ingratiated itself in the series. But I think where the cars differ between the Bond series and Mission Impossible is that the Bond cars tend to have a gadget, and again, the producers done well enough to give the cars almost a personality of its own right. So there's a gadget that will do something. There's a reason why Aston Martin DB5 is the most beloved amongst Bond fans, because of its feature inside Goldfinger. So I can understand, whilst abroad driving a BMW, it's inconspicuous, and it's very much in keeping with the character. I will say this: in Mission Impossible 3, he does drive a station wagon when he goes to the convenience store. So that would probably indicate that he does have some kind of Americana, some Americana vehicles. But also interesting as well that during this period of time that BMW were also supplying the cars for, certainly during Mission Impossible 1, the cars for Bond as well. So the Z3, 750IL, and the Z8. So again, it's the cars themselves in the films don't have a gadget, but their usefulness, and they're seen as a good getaway car, a good car to have in a tricky situation.
Yeah, good one. I think the i8 was the one that had the dashboard with all the intel on it. So as they're kind of trying to make it over to the car silo, isn't he doing something with the dashboard and the screen? So they integrated some tech into that, which made that quite cool. But yeah, you're right with the the DB5 and the Aston Martins, it's kind of like the Bondmobile. I think everyone's got this deep affection, and when it turns up on screen, it's like a character. When you see the DB5, it almost has its, when he turns the light on in the garage in Skyfall, it even has its own cue music. It's like a bam, bam. It's like, hello. Remmert, you think? Well, what's your thoughts on the cars overall and how they're used in the MI franchise? And
I think it's very much
yeah, you go for it.
it goes a little bit in the same style as I think Heat, the movie Heat, and also the Transporter movies. I think, which are the Audis, where Jason Statham drives all the Audis.
Mm.
I feel Mission Impossible has that same feeling. What he was saying about like being in Europe, going for like the south of France, or all these kind of in a way non-American locations where to an American audience, which of course is a huge audience, it might also feel more interesting and more exotic to use those kind of automobiles instead of using, Ford Mustang, or something like that, which would not make much sense in Europe because they're not that common, So it would be a real choice. It would be more like, I guess, what's the series with all the like the Fast and Furious series or something, But then
Oh yeah,
they go really crazy. But for like the sort of more, Heat and Transporter and Mission Impossible, I really see this actually as a fitting brand for one of those franchises.
What are they driving around in Heat then?
I don't
You
even
don't
know.
mean Ronin? Do you mean Ronin when he's out in Europe?
Maybe Ronin as well. Yeah, indeed, that's true. Yeah, like there's a few of those, and there's also like Taxi. There was like all these '90s movies where there
Yeah,
were all these like
the Luc Besson ones. Yeah.
Yeah, all those, all those sort of where you just picture cars just racing through, all these French towns or whatever. That just, fits. Those kind of brands fit better.
I got a quote here. I'm just going to throw it up on the screen and crudely paste over it. If you guys are watching on YouTube, by the way, I'm just throwing up graphics and splaying it over the faces of Paul, Remmert, and Zed. But what I found interesting with the BMW stuff is how they integrate it and they don't go for the heavy logos. And there was a lady that was associated with the marketing for BMW said that they shy away from gratuitous plugs. None of the characters utters the letters BMW, and nor are there lingering close-ups of the brand's famous hood-mounted propeller logo. And this is all done by design, basically, that they think that there's going to be a tipping point between what the audience will accept and what they think will then just be taking them out of the movie as soon as they start getting too logo heavy. And just to finish that
fits in with the other stuff where even the Casios and because in the second Mission Impossible the Casio logos are even I think not visible, right? I think they even altered them either digitally or manually scraped the Casio logos off. So because in the first movie you don't get a close up of the watch, but in the second movie you do get a close up. I guess they didn't have a real partnership deal, so they even removed the logo. So I think that doesn't fit in the Mission Impossible style.
Tom Cruise does that a lot actually. He did that in Minority Report. You know the watch that I'm talking about.
Oh,
Remmert, right?
Yeah. But wasn't it like that's even a rebrand or something, right? Wasn't that the one where they actually put another brand on it?
Yeah, wasn't it like Bulgari or something?
Like it was a Bulgari or something.
Yeah, so he's basically when he loses his kid by the swimming pool and he has to check his watch, I think, and then does the timer that way. But then when you see and by the way, if you're a watch brand, right, you're getting all excited. You're the CEO. You've hired out the cinema. You know that you've supplied to the franchise. Just fucking wait. Our minute's coming up. It's our time to shine. And then they have the close up and they've completely not only erased your logo but put another brand on top of it.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Just going back to the cars real quick. So I just wanted to, when I was doing some reading earlier about the No Time to Die Astons, and you got Ford, I thought it was great. By the way, they brought back the V8. That is my favorite car. That in a way looks like what we were talking about, the kind of Dodge, the muscle car of the Aston Martins, the one that can get you in a headlock, basically. But I did read a story about the Valhalla that they had. So the Valhalla wasn't ready, I think, as they were going to film. And Eon said to Aston Martin, if you can get this baby driving, we'll stick it in the movie. So they worked like round the clock for like 3 months to get the Valhalla on the road and get it working. And then they just stick it in a static shot behind them on a phone call. Again, if you're in that movie, you're like, fuck. Oh, it's man. So I just thought that was funny. I read that somewhere. By the way, I'm good. I'm going to leave all the links over on the show notes because we are referencing a lot of websites where I've got my information, including yours, Remmert, and yours, your Instagram. But shall we move on to a bit of tech? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, phones, laptops, etc. Zed, over to you on this one. When people think it's about tech, it's a lot about logos and the back of laptops weaved into films. Do you think one franchise has done it better than the other in terms of not taking you out of the movie?
Yeah, so I think with the Mission Impossible franchise, they've had a variety of tech. So we've mentioned about Apple in the first few films, but if we look at, say, I think it was Rogue Nation, they started using Microsoft Surface Pros, as well as the Nokia phones as well. And I think it was also Mission Impossible 3. I think one of the characters was also using a Nokia phone, but they removed the Nokia logo from that. I think it's that subtlety of that. I think when we look at the Bond franchise, Sony's partnership through the Craig era was very prominent. It was always going to be a Via laptop, it was going to be a Bravia television, it was going to be, a Cybershot camera. So that in itself was like, it was a package. And again, I think, as we said before, it was like a package to sell. Whereas with the Mission Impossible films, it's been more a technology to use. And I think, say, certainly with Rogue Nation, the way they used the Surface Pro, it was very universal at that time. Just like the first time you saw like a proper tablet computer being utilized. And I think that was the brand, how it was used was really good, actually. But yeah, they've been, there's a variety of tech that they've used, and again, it's subtle. You don't say, oh, that's Ethan's phone, and there's no partnership with that.
Yeah,
as we've had with Sony.
Interesting. Remmert, just before I bring you in, I brought this, I looked on the Concave website. I think that's how you say it. And I was quite surprised to see how all the tech lines up with the Mission Impossible franchise. And that's all the number one most visible brands. And going all the way back to the first one, you have Apple at number one. Then it's Jean-Paul Gaultier with the glasses. Except two, you've got the Triumph motorbikes, but that's because that's the whole last scene. But the Mission Impossible 3, like you were saying, Zed, you've got the Nokia. Ghost Protocol is all Apple. I mean, the other brands don't even come close in terms of visibility. And then Rogue Nation, you got some Microsoft, Dell. But it's surprising. I think tech, in one way, maybe it's because I'm not looking for it as much. And perhaps you are, Emma, because I know you're into the laptops. You even bought Q's old laptop and kind of pieced it together and things like that. Unless you're really looking for it, I think it's one of these things that you can just say, well, there's another widescreen telly. Your thoughts?
Maybe, yeah, I think tech is actually one of the bigger product placement categories for any movie or series. We just don't really notice them because tech is all around us, and it's maybe just more useful stuff that we use all day, every day. But every series has like Apple phones, Apple watches, Apple laptops, and Dell is very big. Dell sponsored also, or at least provided a lot of stuff for No Time to Die. And that was all on purpose. That was not by coincidence. So a lot of those things seem not as glamorous. So for us, they might seem like they're just randomly chosen, but they're actually not. And I think they're actually just a very big part of placement. And you just see it a lot, especially nowadays with all the tech. There's just tech everywhere, and in the movies they use it more and more. I mean, even the first Mission Impossible movie was '96, when mobile phones were just out. But I mean, they're constantly on their mobile phones already there, and the computers and the laptops and the trackball mouse next to that big CIA computer. There's a lot of things already put in there, but especially the big brands, they are not in there usually by coincidence. So I think it's not bigger or less big than anywhere else. Like we saw No Time to Die, like you pointed out earlier, that before we spoke earlier about like Nokia having a kind of unlucky placement there with the COVID hitting and then having a phone there that basically.
I really want to get onto that. Yeah. So, I mean, basically, I found the Nokia scenes actually really aggravating because the phone's ringing, The phone's like the big Nokia logo as he picks up the phone in Madeline's place. It's compared. I think this is where Mission Impossible gets it right in terms of the logos, because I'm never taken out of a Mission Impossible film with a logo. And we were just talking about the first Mission Impossible with the the Apple mistake with the computer that they paid 15 million. I went through that scene on YouTube. I couldn't even see a single logo as he's tapping away on that laptop, right? And that really goes to show something, that they're paying money, but that you don't even have a logo on the laptop that you're seeing, as opposed to when you had the No Time to Die product placement, and because everything got kicked back into the long grass with COVID, that the actual scenes had to be reshot, right? Because of the stuff that they were using was outdated. They didn't have the phones anymore, or that the model of phones was like 3 years old by the time they came out. Is that true? Do you think?
I think I'm not sure how much they reshot, but they definitely in the commercials they made with Lashana Lynch, they just digitally altered the phone that she was holding.
Right.
But in the movie itself, there's actually the model that the one that he's holding there in the pictures, No Time to Die, is actually a mock-up that somebody at Nokia made. I'm not sure why they did that actually, but I have it on the website a little bit about how there's just people that make these mock-ups for design purposes, or they're good at making these models. And I just didn't understand why they made like basically a good-looking generic Nokia model, but not a specific model. I mean, maybe to make it more timeless, but in a way, in the end, they couldn't sell like that particular model, and they didn't. At least not that I haven't seen. Like with Sony, they had much more tie-in because they had the actual phone. It was just a standard Sony Ericsson or Sony. Put it in a package, logo of the film, and they can sell millions. But this Nokia, I think it wasn't even a real phone that he was using.
For those purposes, though, right then? So they didn't reshoot anything with those scenes. They just put a phone in that could future-proof it. So it doesn't really matter if it does come out 5-10 years. It's not going to be dated. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. But I guess the benefit, there's not really a benefit of then selling that particular phone. So okay, the Nokia logo is in there, but that would have been also with an old phone, So I don't know why they didn't just take an existing phone and
or like a flip
marketed
phone,
the hell
like,
out of it afterwards and sold sold the No Time to Die Nokia. I don't know why they did not do that, but that's yeah.
Or did they not do it because it was? So I'm going back to square one on this. Did they not do that because the film was already 3 years old, pretty much by the time it came out? From when they
but because they
recorded
didn't
it.
use an existing phone anyway, they could just market it to any phone.
Oh, they could have just used it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
right,
I don't know why they did not do that. But yeah, it seemed to me like
it's interesting though, isn't it? It's an interesting area of like whether you have the exact model in the film or you put what you want to sell, but with tech, obviously more than anything else, more than even style and fashion, it goes on quicker and dates quicker, that you won't circle back and buy that phone or that laptop because by the time it hits the market, it's already a couple of years old and something else might have come out in its place.
That's probably true, but probably the initial sales could be so much bigger than sweater. Like the sweater sales might be decent, but if you sell, Apple phones, they might sell millions more or not. So I think the return on investment is probably on short term is much bigger. But yeah, the sweaters and the shirts, like the Sunspell shirt, is timeless, of course. So that is a benefit for sure.
Yeah. So, did you want to come in now? I had another thought on the tech, but I didn't want to block you out.
Yeah. So going back to like the Sony Xperia phones, they were coming out in like special packaging for the Bond films, whereas a normal Nokia phone would sell on its own right. There's probably an added cost to having special packaging or special features onto it in order for an anticipation of return on investment. So for the Mission Impossible films, they've just used the tech as it is, not having any big song and dance about it. But if you know what the model it is, you know what it is. Similarly, like the watches and everything else that we've been talking about. So it's not so much an exclusive item, whereas with the Bond franchise, the technology is also marketed as not only as a souvenir, prop, but a collectible as well. So that's another thing that is in their favor as part of the marketing strategy.
I had another thought. Okay, regarding the tech. You have like say Bond in front of the Vio, right? In Venice at the end, the bitch is dead and stuff like that. Now you could have like a 20-second slot, right, where that's visible. Versus say, I don't know, Tanner they're not going to shoot this, but imagine Tanner on the phone for 30 minutes talking to the Babe channel or something using one of Sony's phones. They'd be like, well, that's great that we got 30 minutes of screen time, but it's Tanner on the phone and it's not Bond, right? I mean, it'll be a weird film, just Tanner calling up like Pornhub or whatever for photos, but you get the idea, right? Where do they kind of put the premium with this? Is it like, well, yes, you can have Q looking at a widescreen that might be LG, but it's Q. It doesn't have as much agency as Bond doing it. So I don't know. Do you reckon they kind of bargain and negotiate with the costs in terms of which character is using the gear? Remmert, I'll throw that curveball over to you.
I can't say for sure, but I can imagine totally that's a major part of it. Yeah, especially with the tech and all those kind of products for sure, and the watches as well. I think those are also calculated. You know, like the watches, for example. Of course, Bond will have the Omega, but all the other characters will maybe have an Omega or have another watch from the same watch group, let's say, you know. So, but they'll probably be down the ladder. They probably won't be better than watch. There might be a Hamilton watch here and there, you know, or the Longines watches, you know. So there's definitely, I'm sure, like a hierarchy in what gets put in whose hands.
Just to add in on that, I read somewhere about this, I don't know whether it's true or not, but like Apple will never give if the antagonist is using an Apple computer, they will veto it because they will always want their tech to be associated with the protagonist or the good guys, because there's that kind of association with that. So again, I don't know if that's a myth or not, but certainly, likewise, when we're thinking about tech being given to certain characters, I think there's a consideration in that in terms of how the tech is being viewed, how it's being utilized. If it's used by the main person, there's an expectation that there's more people wanting to use that as opposed to somebody who may be the villain.
That's interesting. That's a bit like you hear that. I heard that way back when with American Psycho. Was it Armani didn't want to have their body bag? They didn't want to be associated with when he's dragging the body out, and they go, "Oh, where'd you get that overnight bag?" And he had to say Jean Paul Gaultier because Jean Paul Gaultier is brilliant and doesn't give a fuck and gets the gag, but Armani doesn't want to be associated with a serial killer in New York. So yeah, you kind of have brands that don't want to get on the wrong side of the stuff, for want of a better word. Shall we go to style while we're talking about Jean-Paul Gaultier? Last one, and we're going to shoot. I'll bring you in first on this, Remmert. The style of Bond. I wrote a little note down that the style of Bond as a community and like its own village, as we all know. And then they kind of branch off with brands get hold of licensing deals after the film. And as someone that runs Bond Lifestyle, have you ever considered doing a Hunt Lifestyle separate website dedicated to the costumes and clothes of Ethan Hunt?
Not considered it, but I do have the other websites, Watch ID and Sunglasses ID, where I do the watches and sunglasses, and there I definitely feature all Ethan Hunt's eyewear and watches, because I mean those are for me really iconic pieces, and those are definitely worth looking at and putting online. The other thing would be the jackets, maybe, but jackets is such a broad subject as well, and it's such a specific thing that, that would warrant its own website. And I know there's websites out there that do that. So, but just Ethan Hunt, for Ethan Hunt, I mean, it probably would be worth it because seeing how long it's going on now, it might be a whole new thing. It might just also keep on going forever. But this one, of course, also really hangs on, I think, Tom Cruise. Bond is a little bit less tied to one person. So you know, like I'm not sure if it's the same appeal, let's say, as Bond, which is more universal.
Yeah. Zed, have you ever thought about doing Hunt Lifestyle? Because you pretty much do it on your channel and in your daily life anyway.
In a word, yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I've been very fortunate to get both the Belstaff jackets from Mission Impossible 3, both the Ethan and the tactical jackets, and I think it's more how the jackets or clothes are used in the film, because these are both in action orientated scenes. And I know we've talked about this separately, Pete, about like the matchless jacket that's being featured or advertised in for Mission Impossible 7. That's it's not spoiler to say, but it's not as featured in any action scenes. But it is still a good jacket. But a bit frustrating is still in pre-order, even though the film's been out for a month and they've not just not put through on sale. So
yeah, I've emailed them. I've asked them if they wanted to add a comment. I didn't hear anything back. I think they fly really close to the wind with their advertising as well. Like I'm pulling up some slides here. You can see on the YouTube from their Instagram account, they have like pictures of crews and pre-order the jacket. I mean, the Craig Blouson, the making of, and they've got a picture of Daniel Craig wearing the jacket. I'm thinking these guys didn't get the license. We know that, right? But they're unashamed. I think they're just going to do it until they get red letters in the post. I don't think they really give a fuck. Sorry, I cut you off there, Zed. What you
Well, it was actually a good point, because I think we're going to talk. I mean, in terms of jackets, so like the John Varvatos jacket, albeit that it's very similar in style in one Inspector as the one in Fallout. It still is a very stylish jacket. The way it was used in both scenes, in both Mission Impossible and in Inspector, was very action orientated, and in essence, it's a bit of a for the second film in a row running. The matchless. It's funny that Ethan's wearing the matchless Craig jacket in green leather, so it's Ethan copying Bond, you could say, in kind of the style wise, albeit with their own little take on it.
Sorry, I just got an invite to a salsa lesson that distracted me for a second. Yeah, okay. Look, Roger's just come into the room as well. I think this is. I mean, you can really go on all day with the style of each, because we're both locked into the clothes and how. I mean, I think it's funny how you have. So you don't have a signed-on tailor for Ethan Hunt like you have Tom Ford with James Bond. Yeah, I know the tailors that have featured in, say, like Ghost Protocol. I think it was Jason Kim for Ghost Protocol, which was great. And then you have a tailor that's I interviewed last week for Dead Reckoning, but he's got an NDA, so he can't talk about anything. They almost don't. They're very shy about bringing brands and bringing tailors to the forefront and having them kind of piggyback on the success of the franchise, I think. And it's a complete interesting contrast, just to bring this full circle, whereas I think the Bond franchise eagerly look for those partnerships and sponsorships more readily, and everything seems like it could be a garage sale when it comes to Bond. It's like, do you want to be on Bonds? Great, sign this check and we'll put you in the movie. Like, they even go to countries like Morocco, I think, even like paid to be in the but that was also in Rogue Nation, I think, like Morocco. Or is it Fallout? Was it Fallout Rogue Nation?
No, it was Rogue Nation.
It was Rogue Nation. But that's actually another interesting one. We'll perhaps get onto that maybe another time. Like countries, they have to be, they're the ones with the biggest amount of money of all, right? Surely that they can just go, right, we can peel off 50 million if you can come over to our country for all of 10 minutes and show the sites.
It's kind of a missed opportunity in a way, if you think about it, because it's kind of the continuation of Mission Impossible is pretty well done, actually, with Tom Cruise playing the main character. The stories kind of following each other. Like it's a fairly cohesive, coherent 7 movies now. So they could have actually built up like an iconic car, maybe like Bond had, or an iconic this or an iconic that, or a brand. They could have done that actually if they wanted to, or if they really set off to do that from the beginning. But it is interesting that they didn't do that, and there's something to say for just being independent, and whatever they make is just they see every movie as a new movie maybe, and utilitarian products, whatever they can use, or whatever gets them the free cars to shoot the scenes, that's what they take. But maybe it is a missed opportunity that there's not like gonna be like, oh, like the Mission Impossible car, everybody wants it, or that is a shame.
I don't think they had that at the forefront of their mind to set out to make 7 films. I mean, otherwise, I'm sure there would have been some kind of character arc. I mean, you couldn't get any two different films from Mission 1 to Mission Impossible 2, right? I mean, it's not like Dr. No going from Dr. No to From Russia with Love. These are two complete. They don't even look like they could be in the same franchise. These two films stylistically. So to have, I mean, I think it's only until the fourth one that they started to hit their straps with the identity of the franchise. But let's finish with that actually, because I want to get into the rankings of the films real quick, just to end off, because I think it'll be fun to do. So Zed, let's go to you first. Do you want to do like a reverse order or of your top? How do you rank the films in terms of best to last?
Best to last or last to best?
Let's go last to best actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Build up to the suspense.
Okay. So MI2.
That's your least favorite?
I know. I think again, it's the stylistic of it. That was just I can waffle on for it, but I know we're running for time. But MI2, then MI3, and I'm reluctant to put it at that because I think MI3 actually changed the series a bit more in terms of branding and was actually, brought in a bit more brands into it, like Belstaff and a few others. Then I'm debating on this one, but Rogue Nation, then Dead Reckoning.
Okay, interesting.
And then MI1 and Ghost Protocol be my. I don't know if I missed some.
Yeah, you've missed out Fallout.
Oh yeah. So Fallout would be number 3. Then Ghost Protocol. Then
hold on, you fucked it now. You fucked it completely. So you got. I've been writing them down. So you had from least to best. You got MI2, MI3,
yeah.
Rogue Nation,
yeah.
Dead Reckoning,
yeah.
And then
Fallout.
So Fallout is at number 3.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Then
Ghost Protocol.
And
Mission Impossible itself.
Okay, the first one.
Yeah.
Alrighty, nice. You must have loved, right? So, did you notice in Dead Reckoning the kind of Dutch angles at the beginning when they're in the pre-titles when they're talking to Kittredge? I fucking loved that. So, like all the kind of lower, below the head angles. That just was everything Kittredge in the first one in the restaurant scenes, and I was in my seat going, it's the angles. They're doing the same angles.
Yeah.
Fuck up, you idiot. Remmert. Okay, least favorite to best, please.
Okay. It's hard from memory here. I think I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna put Rogue Nation actually as my last.
Oh no, really?
Yeah.
He hangs off the side of a plane.
Yeah, I know.
Are you not entertained?
I was not entertained. Like somehow it didn't. Somehow I remember watching that movie and I was just like, oh my! To me, it didn't hit. It just didn't work. So I'm gonna probably go something like Rogue Nation, 3, 2, Fallout, and then we're gonna do Dead Reckoning, and then
so Fallout. So Dead Reckoning's at number 3 on the podium, and that's number 2. So it's between the first one and Ghost Protocol. Oh, it's interesting.
No, wait, sorry. I'm gonna do Ghost Protocol. It's gonna.
I knew I should have done best to last. It's so much harder to do.
It's so much difficult.
And by the way, it's not like it wasn't on the agenda, guys. It was like on the fix.
You're catching us off guard. I'm gonna do. I'll do 1, 2, 3. I'll do.
All right. Just give me your top 3 then.
1 is 1.
Oh, really? Okay. 1 is 1.
2 is Fallout, and 3 is Dead Reckoning. That's what I'm gonna do.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll get on that. So you and Zed are locked in with the first one, which is really cool actually, because it's such a good film, the first one, and it holds up, legitimately holds up. And I've got a personal affection for it because I'm doing a book at the moment with the tailor that was involved with the film and everything. So I'm getting some first-hand information and knowing some of the brands. Anyway, so I'm locked in I'm with you on Mission Impossible, but I'll give you mine from last to first. So Mission Impossible 3 is in at last place. I just can't. There's so many weird things that happen in that film that I can't get on board with. The main heist, getting the rabbit's foot, him going across the skyscrapers, and you're like, oh great, let me see how that happens. What's going on inside? And except it's John Rhys Meyers in a car talking to his chick about her dreams or some shit. Like, what? And then Tom Cruise just flies out of a skyscraper. And anyway, Mission Impossible 2 is painfully, it's in second to last place. That's best bit. Stay alive. You're with me on that, Zed?
I'm with you.
Yeah. That's by the way, if you're Tandy Newton, how are you not cracking up with that? Okay, now action. I mean, he is howling at her, howling with all the big wind and the sparks. He's so intense, and he's saying the most ridiculous lines. All right, sorry. MI2, second to last. I've got, I don't know. God, I'm looking at the list. Dead Reckoning after that, even though I loved it. Dead Reckoning's there. And maybe this can change because I've only seen this one once. I've seen the others 1,000 times.
And that's why I also saw it once.
So Ghost Protocol at number 4. By the way, I had a bad experience watching Dead Reckoning as well because we watched it in a very tiny little boutique cinema here in Chiswick, which was fine. I really loved the cinema. But I had this guy in front of me who was so tall and he was sitting forward like for half the movie. So he was just leaning forward. And
yeah.
I mean, it's bad enough if you're leaning forward, but if you're 6 foot plus leaning forward, it completely, in a small screen, it completely cuts off half the screen. And so I had to kind of watch it in the aisle, basically. I was watching it near the fucking fire exit just so I can watch around this guy. And then by the time it got to the jump, I said, right, I had a word with him. I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, you've got to fucking move. I'm watching the jump on full screen. You've got to sit back. I've been waiting for like 3 years for this film. Anyway, number 4 is Ghost Protocol. And I think the Burj Khalifa is probably the best set piece out of all the franchise. Rogue Nation's at number 3. And I would be with you guys, but I've put the Mission Impossible. I put the first one at number 2 because I think if I had both DVDs in my hand, I'd always want to watch Fallout. I'd always want to put Fallout on. It's got such a kick-ass ending. It's got him running around London, jumping off buildings, breaking his feet, hunting down Henry Cavill. And I love it when he calls Henry Cavill a prick. Actually, that might be my favorite bit. When he's in the helicopter and he's like, that's good. Right, prick. That's brilliant. Anyway, all right, gang. That's probably about all we have time for. I want to thank Zed from Tie Another Day on Instagram. Zed, you've got a series of Mission Impossible watches that you're posting, and you've reviewed a bunch of jackets on my blog, which is also great. I'll put all the links on the show notes at From Tailors With Love. .co.uk. Any clues to what we've got coming out this Sunday? Because I know you like to do your Sunday best.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to Casios. So we had Mission Impossible 1's Casio last Sunday. It's going to be Mission Impossible 2, and then following in a fortnight's time, it will be the very limited edition MI3 Casio that will be featured. So watch out for those.
Love it. And Remmert over at Bond Lifestyle, but also Watch is ID. Is it Watch ID?
Watch-ID.com, yep.
Yep. And Sunglasses ID as well. And really, really handy sites. Again, if you want to learn more about the Oakleys and some of the watches and also the other stuff that Tom does with Top Gun Maverick, you can learn about the aviators and things like that over there. I'm sure you guys know it. But Remmert, Zed, thanks so much for coming on, and until next time.
Thanks for having me.
Great, guys. Hang on the line a minute.